Well, first off, Trump won. He won every district but Johnson County. Johnson County ended up going for Nikki Haley by a single vote. A single vote. But Trump still won every other county. The vast majority of them overwhelmingly, not even close in the majority of these counties. Ron DeSantis came in second. Nikki Haley came in third. Second and third were pretty close together, only a 2-point gap. Vivek Ramaswamy came in fourth with, what, 7% of the vote. He dropped out after this, and I gotta say, my favorite part of the Iowa caucus, before I give you my larger conclusion as to where the Republican Party goes from here and how Donald Trump is almost is pretty likely, like 80 to 90% chance going to be the nominee. I do want to talk about the Vivek Ramaswamy posting that was going on last night. So the day of the election, Vivek Ramaswamy was trying to get back all of the Republicans that he had lost by Trump, like throwing him under the bus because Trump wanted Vivek Ramaswamy's votes, and he saw that he at least had like 7 or 8 points, so he wanted his support. What happened is that Trump made a post on Truth Social on the 12th that Vivek Ramaswamy basically is a soy loser. And that's not exactly how he puts it, but that is how he puts it. It's not those exact words, but if somebody could get the Truth Social post, I could read it to you, and I would say it's a not flattering picture of Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, this might be confusing for people who have watched Vivek be nothing but a brown noser for Donald Trump over the last, like, 8-10 months. But at the end of the day, if Vivek Ramaswamy is running against him, then he's still running against him. And he thinks that he should be president, not Donald Trump. And so if you're Donald Trump and you see somebody who thinks that they should be president and not you, you're not a happy camper. And so Donald Trump started lashing out at him. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy just invested how much time, how much effort? He did the most campaign stops in Iowa of anyone. He invested how much time and effort into this campaign? He can't just drop out because Donald Trump told him to, even if, as many people suspect, he's angling for a cabinet position now. So what did he do? He responded like this. One second. I'm sorry. Can we actually get the Truth Social post so you guys at least have context as to what Trump said? Trump, Vivek, and he made multiple Truth Social posts about Vivek, by the way. I'm just going to read one, though. Here it is. But yeah, no, this is a condemnation of voting for Vivek. Vivek started his campaign as a great supporter, the best president in generations, etc. And by the way, how do you even attempt to run against someone when you're also saying not only that he's the best president in generations, but he's the best president in American history, which is what Vivek is saying. How do you say he's the best ever, but I'm even better? It's not a good pitch, man. It's one thing if you were to say I'm better than the other guy. It's another thing for you to say, as Vivek was saying, if he's running against the best president in history, that he, as somebody with no political experience, is better than every single other president and anyone who has ever held the office, including the best president of the United States, which is what he would be saying if we should vote for him over Donald Trump, who he says is the best president in history. It's not a good campaign strategy. It's not. Unfortunately, now all he does is disguise his support in the form of deceitful. He's calling Vivek deceitful, a liar. Campaign tricks. Very sly, but a vote for Vivek is a vote for the quote-unquote other side. Don't get duped by this. Vote for Trump. Don't waste your vote. Vivek is not MAGA. The Biden indictments against his political opponent will never be allowed in this country. They are beginning to fall. MAGA. Now, Vivek saw this and panicked. If somebody he says is the greatest president ever is trashing him on his social media accounts, while you've spent the whole campaign trying to suck up to his base by brown-nosing him, that's a dangerous situation to be in politically, and it risks making the entirety of Vivek's run, even from angling for a cabinet position or building any base of support, it could potentially undercut that in its entirety, leaving him with the hollowed out remains of a movement dead in a year and a half. So obviously that's a difficult position to be as Vivek, and that might send you straight back to the pharmaceutical industry. And so he responded with a goddamn twit longer. Look at this. Yes, I saw President Trump's Truth Social post. It's an unfortunate move by his campaign advisors. I don't think friendly fire is helpful. Donald Trump was the greatest president of the 21st century, and I'm not going to criticize him in response to this late attack. I've met tens of thousands of Iowans across 390 events here, and they are deeply worried, and so am I, that this system won't allow Donald J. Trump anywhere near the White House again. It seems they will stop at nothing to keep him away from power. And he puts that in asterisk, so I think he's angling at assassination there, but that's just speculation from me. I'm worried for Trump. I'm worried for our country. I've stood up against the persecutions against Trump, and I've defended him at every step. I showed up at the Miami courthouse in solidarity. Who gives a fuck? Okay, this is sad. This is sad. Trump called you a deceitful liar and said you're not part of his movement, and you responded by saying, "Oh, no, I will defend you forever. Oh, come, please, please." Vivek's political career is entirely within the hands of Donald Trump, and that's a very difficult position to be in. Ron DeSantis can go back to Florida. Nikki Haley can go back to South Carolina. Vivek Ramaswamy would have to go back to pharmaceuticals. Let me also show you guys a few other posts from Vivek Ramaswamy the day of, when he was getting a little upset about a few things. One second. Let me show you a few. Here's one. No, that's not the one. Where is it? Oh, this was his last campaign pitch, by the way, if you're curious as to why he didn't do that well. There are two genders, and no, a man cannot become a woman. Iowa, I'm asking for your vote tonight. Imagine with the world climate, with the war between Israel and Hamas, the war between Russia and Ukraine, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with fucking infrastructure problems, healthcare problems, inflationary problems, any number of issues, cybersecurity issues. He decides to make his last pitch about trans people being icky. 7%. Look, I understand it's Iowa, that's evangelical central, but the majority of Americans don't care. There was no legs in this campaign past Iowa. It doesn't surprise me that he dropped out. But you know what did surprise him? When people were looking at the Iowa map, you know, this map right here that shows all the counties, the one county won by Haley right here, and he wasn't even on the list. It was Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis. They completely disregarded the idea of Vivek Ramaswamy winning the Iowa primary because he can't win the Iowa primary. But he was upset because he wanted his name included. He wanted it to be 4 names instead of treated like a 3-way race, which it totally is. I was in the Fox News studio in Des Moines this morning and noticed something interesting. They forgot one candidate tonight. I'll trust them to fix it. They didn't. Have they fixed it? They didn't. They did not fix it. They did not. Check this out. I wanted to also show you guys the batting record of Elon Musk on this stuff. If it is accurate that Vivek did more meetings with voters than all of the candidates combined, then I think you would do very well in the vote on Monday. The power of extreme work ethic is usually underestimated. So there's a few problems here. Again, his campaign message was not particularly appealing of, he's the best candidate ever, but choose me anyway. Not the great message. Only appeals to Trump's base. He doesn't have a lot of diversity in his base. He has no experience in politics. So there's a bunch of things undercutting Vivek to not make him a good candidate, whether it be anytime he gets anywhere below his ankles in a policy conversation, he starts to drown. But I think a major contributor to it is nobody thought he had a chance in hell. And since nobody thought he had a chance in hell, no matter how many meetings he does, people don't like to throw away their votes, especially when you're talking about a group of people like Iowa voters who do have a tendency to be pretty strategic at these caucuses. Man, Vivek Ramaswamy, his new attempt is going to be angling for a cabinet position. I wish him nothing but failure, but I of course wish the person that he wants to get a cabinet position from nothing but failure. But I'm also happy to finally be done with him in this campaign. I'm hoping I see a lot less of him, that he just starts a podcast and is done with it. right? Like, which is what I think the inevitable end of this is going to be Vivek Ramaswamy starting a podcast, probably not getting really a cabinet position because he has no history and in politics, and he's not that closely tied to Trump yet, as far as we know. And you know, I don't have any reason to believe that he's gonna come back anyway impactfully. I think this is it. I think it's gonna be Podcast City past this. So on one hand, it's going to be annoying to see him still in my feed from him posting stuff in X media and X Truth Social, not Truth Social, Twitter, promoting his stuff. But I think this is it. I think this is the end of the Vivek train. Choo choo, choo choo. Okay, now that we're done, now that I'm done whining about Nikki Haley, now that I'm done whining about Vivek Ramaswamy and how he's annoying and how he got tricked into thinking that weapons we were sending to Ukraine was getting sent to the cartels because he didn't know what different guns look like, or all the other times he said dumb, stupid shit like we should hand over Ukraine to the Russians so they stop working with the Chinese, doesn't even explain how it works, or that he just bluntly said we're going to pull out of NATO. Yeah, sure, let's let our main export market be destabilized. I'm sure that'll help the few American industries that are still, producing in factories and are selling to the Europeans. Again, our main export market. That won't have any effect. He's a very smart guy. But now that we can move on past this schmuck, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump. Iowa, Donald Trump got what he needed. He won. He won by more than double any of the other opponents. You would have to put all of the other opponents together, and still you would not beat Donald Trump because he's at 56,000, 51% of the vote. Even if you put every other vote together, it still wouldn't beat Donald Trump. But he barely got 50% of the vote. He got barely 50% of the vote when he was already seen as a shoo-in victory. And a decent percentage of the Nikki Haley voters, from the polling I've seen, 50% of the people who voted for Nikki Haley in Iowa said they're not going to vote for Donald Trump if he's the nominee. So there are people in this voting pool that are eager enough to vote in a Republican primary in Iowa, evangelical central, who are not eager enough to vote for Donald Trump and won't vote for Donald Trump. Now, that is concerning for Donald Trump, but if he still has 90% or 92% of the Republican base, he still has 90% of the Republican base. That is one thing that I took away from this that I do think is worrying for Donald Trump, that there are a percentage of Republicans that are still never Trumpers, and those people haven't been consolidated. And if anything, him being charged with 91 counts and many of the other scandals that have gone through have only reinforced many of their beliefs, which has pushed them to go to people like Nikki Haley and to go to other alternatives. So the never Trumpers still exist. They're not as loud as they used to be, but they still exist and they still vote. How significant of an impact they're going to have in the election, I don't know. But I hear Joe Biden angling for those votes when he says something along the lines of, we want Democrats, independents, and reasonable Republicans, when he's sending out those campaign ads. And I think he's aiming for those Nikki Haley voters. And at the very least, we confirmed that those people at least exist. And they make up about 50% of Nikki Haley's base. At least in Iowa. Iowa's one state. It shouldn't be a representative of the whole country. But it is sending us some strange signals. Now, what's next? New Hampshire, later this month. Now, this is where it gets spicy. And I think in New Hampshire, that's going to be where this race is decided. It could go into South Carolina, but that also depends on the results in New Hampshire and the momentum that comes from that. So the most recent polling data I saw from New Hampshire looks very, very, very good for Nikki Haley, which is kind of hard to believe when you see the results in Iowa, which is Trump 51%, Ron DeSantis 21%, Nikki Haley 19%, Vivek Ramaswamy 7%, and Chris Christie's brave warriors, cold, alone in the snow, to prove their loyalty, 35 votes. What brave icons. Anyway, it's hard to see this and to imagine Nikki Haley somehow winning in a place like New Hampshire. And I don't know if she'll win. In fact, I would say with momentum as it is from Iowa, there's a decent chance Donald Trump is going to win. And I would say the win in Iowa, and the win being this decisive, and Nikki Haley not being the second choice, meaning that the anti-Trump vote still could somewhat be divided going into New Hampshire, because Nikki Haley did not decisively declare to the world that this is a two-person race through her actions, even if she continues to do that through her words. I don't know if you guys saw the messaging Nikki Haley gave after this caucus. She said, "We have proven it's a two-person race." She came in third. Now, I understand her logic. She's thinking as a political strategist. She's thinking in New Hampshire, DeSantis was doing worse than Christie. I mean, if DeSantis is doing worse than Christie in New Hampshire, and before Christie dropped out, and Nikki Haley is doing quite well with the last polls I saw a few weeks ago, with her only being down 6 points. And the most recent poll I saw, literally neck and neck. Now, that's from the 14th. That's before the Iowa results. And I think that is going to be a defeater for Nikki, or something that will, in my opinion, probably lead to her defeat. Because I think that's her plan. She's planning on winning in New Hampshire and then taking the New Hampshire momentum into South Carolina. And while that failed for Bernie, Nikki Haley's from South Carolina. So if she wins in New Hampshire and shows herself to be the alternative, and so people going into South Carolina see Donald Trump wins one and Nikki Haley wins one, and Nikki Haley's from South Carolina, even if she's down in the polls there now, the idea is the momentum and the invincibility of Trump being shattered could bring Nikki Haley victory. That's the Nikki Haley path to victory. Ron DeSantis doesn't have a path anymore, because Ron DeSantis is going to perform very poorly in New Hampshire, and then he's going to perform very poorly in South Carolina, and he's going to perform very poorly probably all the way up into his own state. And so I think that Ron DeSantis, if he was smart, it'd be smarter for him to drop out sooner rather than later. Now, if you're Donald Trump, you probably want Ron DeSantis to at least stay in through New Hampshire, because if Ron DeSantis drops out before New Hampshire, there's a chance a decent amount of those voters end up going to Nikki Haley, since they chose Ron DeSantis over Donald Trump. Now, we don't know that for sure. Many of those voters will still go to Donald Trump. But I'm just throwing this out there to show you guys that just because Donald Trump did really well in Iowa does not mean this is what the results are going to look like in every state. Because New Hampshire Republicans are very different than Iowa Republicans. And if you guys think that the Iowa caucus is always going to decide the winner, let me remind you guys of a few things, okay? I believe, like, can we actually look at the Iowa Republican caucus winners recently? Iowa Republican caucus winners. Let me tell you guys who won the last few caucuses in Iowa. Yeah, here we go. Here's the Iowa caucus result history. Okay. So the Republicans nominated in 2008 Mike Huckabee in Iowa. You guys remember Mike Huckabee even being the Republican nominee in 2008? No, that was John McCain. He didn't even become the nominee, let alone the president. In 2012, the Iowa caucuses took place, and the Republicans nominated Rick Santorum. Do you know if he was the candidate in 2012? He wasn't. That was Mitt Romney. In 2016, the Iowa caucuses took place, and the Iowa caucuses nominated Ted Cruz. Was he the nominee in 2016? No, that was that dumb schmuck Donald Trump. My point is, just because we have had the results of the Iowa caucus does not mean that the race is necessarily over. I think at the end of the New Hampshire caucus, that is when the race will basically be officially over, unless Nikki Haley is able to stump Trump's momentum in Iowa and get a victory in New Hampshire and use that momentum going forward into South Carolina and other states. Then the race will at least continue. That doesn't mean she wins. That means she's at least made it slightly competitive. The odds still against her, with the polling everywhere else still pretty bad for her, but it would at least make it a slightly competitive race, and that's what New Hampshire will show. But yeah, Ron DeSantis and Ramaswamy, you're done. They're done. It is actually, even though Nikki Haley did say it was a two-person race, and I know that's her messaging, in a way, that is the only race that is possible, but it is not a two-person race until she wins in New Hampshire.